National Security Advisor Mike Waltz is under fire for the mainstream media after a signal chat about Yemeni strikes, which was meant for top intel insiders, accidentally included a journalist from The Atlantic. Now, the leak has reignited concerns over loose lips and who's actually running the show behind the scenes. It's the kind of mistake that raises red flags across the national security world while giving Democrats an opening to attack the Trump administration.
Senator, 2 points here. First of all, there's a difference between inadvertent release versus
careless and sloppy,
malicious leaks of classified information. The second point is there was no classified information that was on the
Information Committee should get that information.
Our senior politics editor, Chris Bedford, is here to break it all down for us. So, Chris, how did this happen, right? We've been looking at this story now for a day. I just look at this and go, man, this one isn't something that you see every day.
No, and we're still learning more information about exactly what happened here. So my initial take on this is, well, you're not going to have signal on your government phone, so people must have been using their personal phones outside of the SCIFs where they're supposed to be used discussing classified information. But the take that they're pushing out now is that this is actually, signal was installed by the former administration for communication. That still raises questions about record keeping in general. You're supposed to maintain federal records. You can't have your disappearing messages set due between 1 and 4 weeks, as this thread screenshots appear to have them set. There's still that question. Now, they were in the unfortunate position, Republicans, of having a number of these cabinet level secretaries and such already scheduled to be on Capitol Hill to be discussing some important matters of interest to the American people, like the cartels and the illegal immigrant terrorist gangs and things like that. And this got completely sidetracked by that. Now also, the White House is putting out that it wasn't Waltz who actually added the person who appeared to have been added by Waltz, but one of his assistants. So they're going to need names. They're going to need to provide what happened here. You're going to need to see resignations. It's not, when you work for a major political party or candidate or anyone, you can't be the person responsible for multiple cabinet level people being grilled over a dumb mistake on Capitol Hill. It's the first bad news cycle that Democrats have really been able to get their claws into in this whole thing. Now, to put it in perspective, however, it is very much a Beltway sort of story. Jeffrey Goldberg preaches to a very involved set of liberal, globalist, neoconservatives. Not exactly the working class voters the Democrats are trying to reach, but still a very powerful set of people who are making a lot of noise about this. The rest of the country, it may be feeding into the idea that there's not quite the competence you would expect at the top of the Trump administration, but it also may just look like a stupid story over somebody getting accidentally added to a text message chain, and how much hay Democrats can actually make out of that electorally is really questionable.
Yeah, agreed. The larger picture here is a little ridiculous. In terms of whether people care. In fact, the conversation itself is so good that people think it was faked. There's people saying that this was a leak on purpose because it makes everyone look so good. And of course, that's ridiculous. But what's not ridiculous is that the conversation itself is very interesting. There's nothing, as she said, there's nothing top secret in it, but it's respectful. It shows disagreement, shows a very interesting kind of deliberation that
with
goes
some
on.
Emojis.
What's that?
The emojis.
With some emojis.
Yeah, with some emojis.
I put those out earlier today on X. I couldn't help it.
But it shows respectful disagreement on Vance's part. It shows, back and forth. That's rather interesting and relatively positive at the end of the day. On the other hand, the fact that this happened, I think, does alarm people. It doesn't matter, if it doesn't affect the electorate. There is something alarming here. And let me suggest a couple things, a couple bullet points we should run through. One is, this kind of thing happens far more than people think. And everyone knows that it happens in their own lives. But if you talk to people in national security, they will say, as retarded as this is, and it is retarded, right? This does happen more than you want to believe. It's just not at this level with, this level of people involved. Number two is, okay, so then how did it happen? And, I agree with you. It's ultimately going to be on walls, but okay, an assistant did it. Someone's going to have to get fired. And clearly Walz's critics have come out fighting very hard. And you can see them on the right, saying this is an indication that Walz himself isn't fit for the job. And that's another fight that's going to be unfolding, I imagine, over the next year.
Yeah, Walz is someone who has been considered one of the more serious members of the national security team. But he's also someone, of course, generally speaking, in politics and previous administrations, anybody would have to fall on their sword for this. Now, it seems like the Trump administration, properly so, has much more of a war footing with liberal press, where they're not just going to let their enemies pick which among their team get knocked off, like you saw in the first Trump administration. They're not going to give in to that pressure. And President Trump himself has basically treated it, like you said, a simple mistake that didn't really matter. Also, Jeffrey Goldberg's no friend of the administration. He's a serial fabulist and someone who routinely mischaracterizes and inflates things. And I base that on his big story they put out, which was obviously in tandem with Democrats in 2020, where they claimed ridiculously that Donald Trump was going around France attacking and making fun of the Americans who gave their lives in World War I at Belleau Wood, a story which even Trump's critics from within the administration said is absolutely false. So Jeffrey's word does not carry a whole lot of water in Malibu for this White House. But you do have to deal with, where's Waltz going to go from here? He's someone who's got to cling to this job. He just left his seat in Congress, which was a safe, we won by over 30 points, to take this job in the White House. He can't be the first person to fall, so he's not in any hurry to resign himself. And back to that mischaracterization and exaggeration, we're having to take it at Jeffrey Goldberg's word that these were detailed battle plans. I'm curious what they were, and I can see why maybe they're not being shared right now. They were classified. But was this, in 2 hours, F-18s are going to hit the Houthis in Yemen? That's not a detailed battle plan. What exactly was shared over this? And then finally, this was an interesting chat, like you said. I've been on the receiving end on signal groups of internal White House documents that were not supposed to be sent to me. People suddenly, there's total panic that just breaks out. People try to delete messages. They don't know how to. Or they delete it themselves. It's that weird combination of Gen Z signal chatting with boomer technology understanding that leads to some of these mistakes. But those were significantly less interesting internal documents that there wasn't really a wild story there. It was hard to really figure out. Whereas this chat really lays out what's going on, some of the processes, some of the respectful disagreement, exactly like you said. And then there's this one interesting line where they say they're going to take this to the higher level of communication, which the White House is now saying is in reference to the more actual classified communication channels and the methods by which they would go back and forth to be in line with Department of Defense, Department of State, et cetera, protocols on these. I think you're going to get more questions being asked. Democrats are not going to let go of this. But so far, this White House, which is a credit to it, doesn't seem to be panicking.
Yeah, Donald Trump came out today and said that Mike Waltz he's learned a lesson. He's a good man, but they are going after Waltz, and some of the Democrats are also throwing Pete Hegseth in there because they see the opportunity that's in front of them that says, hey, if we can push back, at least make an argument, right? We might not win this war, but this might be a battle that they want to go through and actually have right now. But when you talk about the loyalty that they have here in this Trump administration versus the first Trump administration, where you think that you have better people, at least in this time around. How do you view that in just these early attacks that they're going to be coming under? Because this isn't going to be the last one. But is this a signal that we should be looking at going forward that this Trump administration is actually going to stick with these people because they are more loyal?
So far, that seems to be the case. You don't inspire loyalty if you punish and execute your most loyal soldiers, and especially when it's a mistake as opposed to an intentional leak. So if I was Donald Trump, one question I really would have is how exactly Jeffrey Goldberg's contact information was so easily accessible on Signal, and what kind of signaling past Walz had with Goldberg in the past. Now, of course, he was a congressman before he was in the national security position in the White House. So that could explain it. And Goldberg is, of course, someone who carefully covers the American war efforts, the Department of Defense, et cetera. So that could have been something they were discussing. But how exactly did all these people end up? How did that person end up so easily slipping into your contacts would be the question. But yeah, this administration, we've talked about this a lot on this show, is a sharpened spear compared to the club that was brought around in the first administration. These aren't people who are not really vetted, who are disloyal Republicans. It's not friends from reality television. A lot of these people are significantly more serious. And remember, if we went back 8 years, this was around the time you'd see Jeff Sessions resigning, Mike Flynn resigning. There was a picture on the wall, I remember, at Fox News in one of the offices of the original cabinet, and people were just Xing them off as they dropped one by one and taking bets on who would be next. This administration seems committed to not replaying that sort of turning on each other. And the media's tactics so far haven't always worked. They tried to do this to Elon Musk when they said, oh, he's the real president. He's the real president. And Donald Trump said, listen, I know what game you're trying to play. You're trying to play on my ego. I'm not going to do it. He's not the real president. Everybody knows that. We're not falling for it. This could be another case like that, as long as lessons are learned. Because as you and Matt have both said, this was a deeply stupid mistake.
Well, it's fascinating to me. I mean, it's a great thing on the first count. I think everyone can agree, as Jill was suggesting and you're saying, the administration isn't just freaking out about something like this. They're not falling to the tactic of slaughtering someone for no reason. And also, the internal fighting is much more muted than it was last time. You can see that this time as well. However, I do want to go back to the fact that there are people, you can see them outside the administration, who are suspicious of Waltz and see him as something representing the neocon, neocon foreign policy in some way. And so that's part of this for the audience at home following along. They see Waltz as, not fully trustworthy, perhaps on a full MAGA agenda, maybe not so much leaning in the Vance side of that camp. And tensions are good, healthy tensions are good. But what was interesting to me was in even the conservative press, how many people came running out to say, look what an idiot Walz is. Of course, he did this because he does have enemies on that side. And you can see the tension in foreign policy there. And, these are good, healthy things in any administration, in my view. But the fact that you laid out earlier is something that is still a question mark and will be used in the future, I would predict. And that is, how in the hell, of all people, right, is Goldberg on there? And why is his number so readily available? And there are already people speculating about, that's who, Walz uses to leak and so forth and so on. It's just what people are saying. So that's the kind of palace intrigue, though, that I'm comfortable with and I'm comfortable talking about, here on the show, because it's situation normal. We're not in some crazy place where, the administration's freaking out because of the left, or you have really radical, nutty stuff going on inside. This is typical. It almost feels like we're back in a normal Washington, D.C., no?
Oh, it does. And for your normal D.C. update from me, we're so back to normal that all of the left-wing posters that are constantly plastered all over Capitol Hill, I don't understand any of them. I don't know what they're talking about. I don't know what's got them so up in arms about whatever issues they are. You have to scan a QR code. I don't even recognize some of the faces on it. It seems like we're back in the early 2000s with that, when this left-wingers plastering posters that no one really knows what the heck they're talking about except for the small clique that made the posters. Now, that's a nice return to normalcy. And yeah, if there is one journalist out there who's not going to leak this to the Houthis, it's the guy who served in the Israeli military as a prison guard during an intifada, Jeffrey Goldberg. He's not exactly on the Houthi side. But just to your point, he's also not on J.D. Vance's side. And it certainly seems like, you could see from that chat, neither is Hegseth necessarily. He's certainly more hawkish than Vance is. Vance seems to be the only person in the administration, and it's a good thing he did so respectfully, considering that this all got leaked. He said, hey, maybe this attack isn't actually in line with what we're trying to accomplish as this administration. Maybe the Europeans ought to be doing this, since only 2% of American maritime trade goes through there, but 40% of European trade goes through there. And then you see the interesting back and forth with Hexas saying, yeah, I'm sick of that too. But literally none of them have the ability to launch a concerted strike against the Houthis that the United States has. So it's kind of on us, at least for the time being, to deal with that. That kind of airing of grievances, in the end, though, is so much more preferable to what was seen every single day in the press in 2017, 2018, 2019, and 2020.
I never thought that I would say the sentence, Jeffrey Goldberg might be better than myself. But here I am, because there is absolutely no way that I would have been like, oh, you know what? I'm going to remove myself from this group chat now. I would have been like, I want the tea. I want to know. They don't know I'm here. I'm going to see how long it takes them to figure it out. I have no idea why, as a journalist, as an editor-in-chief, our editor-in-chief is sitting right here next to me. 0% chance I am taking myself out of that group chat. 0. You?
And I'm still wondering who Jeffrey Goldberg was supposed to be. Who is the JG who was who the aide thought that they were adding? Everyone else you can kind of figure out. Some of them are using initials. I think there's an SM, for example, that people assume is Stephen Miller. But who was this mysterious JG, and where are they now?
Now, I don't know about Chris, but I would have. There's a chance I would have taken myself out, but not for the sake of national security. It would have been because I'd be like, oh my gosh, another damn chat group just popped up. I need to remove myself from this thing. I'm on too many of them already. But otherwise, yeah, sure. If you're a journalist there, you might sit there for a while, and then I would want a hilarious moment if I thought people were going into real secret stuff. I mean, can you imagine how great it would be just to break into the chat with a inappropriate joke? Would be incredible.
Listen, at least we can sit here and laugh about it now.
I don't think I ever been able to resist the inappropriate joke. Like the time I was there was an open press list on the plans for Mayor for Life, Marion Barry's funeral. I mean, you're going to miss the chance to reply all? I don't think so.
This is like the Gen Z version of reply all on the email.